So you want to put lights in your scene. After all, if you want to be able to see anything, you're gonna have to have lights. And honestly, lights is what makes your scene actually look like a scene instead of just looking like a project you're trying to figure out how to do. So let's talk about lights. But before we talk about lights, let's just talk about Blender's different rendering engines. And the two we're going to talk about are Eevee and Cycles. So in order to see what these look like, I'm going to go here into the viewport shading, and under viewport shading, I'm going to pick the render tab, which is this ball over here. And if we are in Eevee and I have this light, so like, let's go ahead and turn the power up on this light here. And let me turn down the outside light. So if you're looking at this, you can see that the scene is able to, I can change the scene around and things pretty much update exactly as we're changing it. If I hit G for grab and then Shift Z so I don't move this up and down, you can see that as I move this light around, everything updates in real time. And that's why we call it a real-time rendering engine. Now, if I were to switch to, and I am going to switch to the Cycles render engine, now Blender has to do the calculations for how light is behaving in the system. So if I hit G for grab, Shift Z so that I don't move it on the Z, and you can see that now when I put, every time I put it, it takes a second for Blender to figure out what are the effects of putting the light there. So I'm going to hit G for grab, Z again. I'm just going to shift it over there. And for right now, I am going to shift back into the Eevee rendering engine. So if you want everything in your scene to look the most realistic, Cycles is what you want to use. Now, if you can get by with the effect that you want and use Eevee, Eevee's going to save you a lot more time. So there will be times in the next few minutes where we'll use Eevee and then we'll switch to Cycles because that's our only choice, and I'll show you why. But so now you understand what Eevee is and you understand what Cycles is. Cycles and Eevee, particularly Cycles, have a bunch of different characteristics and, you know, knobs and things you can turn in order to change different things, but now you at least understand what they are. So from here, let's just talk about where the light is coming from in our scene. So right now we're in the Eevee real-time rendering engine and we have one light source here, right? And if I go to our light source properties here under object data properties, I go ahead and select that. And I see that the power is set up to 56 watts. So one way that we can zero this power out or turn it completely off is me to switch that power to 0. And you can see that even though this light is off, I can still see my scene. We're in the render mode right now, so this is what it's going to look like if we turn the camera on and then took an image. I can still see the scene. So clearly, all of the lights are not off. So where's the light coming from? Well, the light is actually coming from this surrounding area here. The world itself has a certain amount of light emission, and that's based on the strength and the color. So if I go to our world properties here on the right side, it's this little picture of a globe. I'm going to go ahead and click that, and we see that we have a strength of 1 and we have a color that is not completely black. So we could turn the strength down. The other way we can turn off a light is to shift this to completely black. Now, with this being completely black, we can't see anything, right? And that's the way it should be. There's no light in our scene. We can't do anything. But now if I go to our light source and I increase the light from 0 to 10, we have a little bit of light in our scene. If I can go ahead and increase that to 100, we have a lot more light in our scene. And this now is the sole source of light in our scene. So this is another way that you'll have to understand, that you'll be able to understand where the light is coming from. If you want a completely matte look with no real shadows, then you can use world lighting. But if you want it to look more realistic, then you have to go easy on the world lighting and more realistic, not completely realistic, but a little bit more realistic with the lights that you have in the scene. So let's talk about how to put other kinds of lights in your scene. Real quick, before I do that though, you have a few options here. You have a few options here of different light sources. So this is a point light. You can also have a spotlight, and you can control, where this is. You can also control what color it is, you have an area light, and then you have a sunlight. So the sun is a little bit different from the others. The sun comes from as the same angle from everywhere all at once. So 100 is a lot for the sun. If I turn this to 20, you can see a little bit more clear that this is kind of how the sun would work if it was coming from somewhere outside. So now let's talk about how to put other lights in the system. So just for a moment, I'm going to come out of our render mode, and I'm going to hit Shift A to add a plane. We are going to make this plane a light source. So in order to do that, it's a bit big right now. I'm going to tab into edit mode. I'm going to hit S for scale. I'm going to scale it down. Then I'm going to hit tab to get out of edit mode. I'm going to hit G, Z to bring it up. Now let's make this a light. So if you want to take an object and make it into a light, we do that through the materials. So we're going to go to the materials panel over here, and I already have something called light, but let me show you how to actually make it a light. So any new material is going to look like this, and the way that you make it a light is that you turn the emission strength to something other than 0, and you give it a light color. So right now this one is set to 10. The emission is white. Now if I go to my render mode, you can see that the only light I have is still that point light over here. And that's because when you want to light things through a material, it only works in cycles. So now it means I have to actually go into the cycles rendering engine in order to see what this looks like. So I'm going to go over here into our output properties, sorry, not output properties, our render properties, and I'm going to select cycles, right? And now that I've selected cycles, you can see what this light actually looks like in the scene. So we have our point light over here, which you can't see, and you have our actual material that is putting off light here that you can see. So now you understand how to take any material that has this principal BSDF, you can turn into an emitter. Now there are other ways to make emitting colors, but I think for right now, this is the only way I want to show you. So we are going to now do some changes to our scene. So I switched out of render view mode. We are now in material preview mode. I am going to delete this material here. And now, in order to make our scene look more realistic, let's go ahead and make this light bulb, because it is a light bulb. Let's go ahead and make it emit light. So in order to do that, I'm going to go over here to the material. This is a light bulb that I downloaded from the internet. And it turns out that, yes, it does have this principal BSDF. And in order to get this to be the correct, in order to get it to be an emitter, I am going to turn this up to 10. So now that this is 10, and I want to see what it looks like, and I have it selected, I'm going to go to our render properties mode, or our render mode, just to see what this looks like. Okay, so that looks good, but we can also see that our lamp shade is actually blocking the light. Now there's probably ways to get the light to shine through this lampshade, but the easiest way to do this is we're just going to select our lampshade. Turns out that it is also using the principal BSDF, and we are just going to turn up our emissions for the lampshade. So let's just put 2 here. We're going to leave this dark color because I think that makes the most sense for the type of light that it'll put out. And I'm going to deselect it just so you can kind of see what it looks like. And now this is what our scene looks like. So we have this point light over here that you can't see. And then we have our lamp here that you can see. And we have a bulb at the top that is giving out a certain amount of light, or a bulb inside that's giving out a certain amount of light. And that's what you see here in the reflection on the desk. And then also we have the lampshade, because the lampshade is actually a diffuser, right? It diffuses the light from a light source. But it certainly looks like that, at least for the most part, it looks like that, as we have made it a emitter as well. So now you understand how to go into your scene and make anything a light that you want, whether you want to use actual light sources native to Blender, or you want to take a material or object and make that a light source. So remember, if you do decide to make a material a light source, you are going to have to do it in cycles. Otherwise, you can go to Eevee, which is the much faster option. You can still see our lampshade as a light source, but it's not really giving off any light. There are ways to get around that, but for right now, I don't want you to think about that. I want you to use what we've done here, and I want you to give all of your scenes at least 4 different lights. So that's 4 different lights. So be creative. Find objects that would have light, might give off light. Make something that looks like that, and then put your light in the scene. Or just be creative with how light might be coming and bouncing around, and might make your scene look more interesting. All right, I will see you on the next one. And if you want to learn more about Blender, or you want my speed key cheat sheet, or otherwise want to be a part of the EduCraft training team, click the link in the description and let's start training.